You can go. Thank you. I was about to say my colleague Janet is helping out doing the tech, and we are going to be recording this session. So for folks who maybe don't want to be recorded, you can have your video off. Um, and if you can introduce yourself in the chat, as I said, name, pronouns, org and role, and then your favorite winter sport. I will go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Kathy Plate. I am Senior Director of the lab at Progressive Multiplier Fund. I am somewhat new here, so I'm excited. This is my first Fundraising Friday as a staff member. I actually previously worked at Ultraviolet, where we were a grantee of Progressive Multiplier Fund, and I participated in the Fundraising Friday like as part of a panel a few years ago, so that was fun. And as I said, at Ultraviolet, I was there for about 10 years, and I was primarily in charge of our digital campaigning and our digital fundraising. So that's, I'm going to admit, my biggest fundraising strength, but I have also worked at multiple organizations and been parts of bigger legacy orgs, smaller organizations with lots of different fundraising teams, styles, revenues, etc. So really excited to be talking to you all today. And I also, for anyone who's not already familiar with what we offer through Resilience Initiative, through our partnership, we have fundraising coaching where we can do one-on-one individual meetings. And this is great, especially for anyone who really wants to go deeper about anything that either comes up in this training or that you're thinking about as you're planning out the year. You can reach out to Michelle Mengel at Resilience Initiative if you want to sign up for that. And then we're going to have more trainings as we go through the year. These are monthly. And this is going to be, this is part one of our fundraising plan training, and part two will be next month in February. So this is our wonderful team. I'm sure some of you have worked with my colleagues. As I said, Janet, our chief of staff, is behind the scenes here on Zoom. I don't know if you've already introduced yourself, Janet, in the chat, but you have. If you haven't, please do. And yeah, so we have a whole mix. As I said, one of my expertise is around digital fundraising. We have folks who have done fundraising across the board all over. And so we make sure to match you all with folks who have expertise and can help you out with whatever you're wanting to learn more and get strategic assistance with. And if you aren't familiar with Progressive Multiplier Fund, we are an organization where we envision a future where the means of justice are as durable as the purpose they serve, and we grow the progressive movement's power through economic liberation, equipping those working for justice and democracy to build financial resilience. Their pursuits remain bold, adaptive, and enduring. TLDR, we want to make sure the movement is funded in order to be as strong as possible. That's the takeaway. Okay, so for today, we're really going to talk about the first part of planning and learning how to integrate what you either already know or what you've already done into your preparation, figuring out your capacity, and then identifying and prioritizing what revenue streams you want to highlight this year as you go forward in the planning process. And I'm going to pause real quick because I've just remembered I forgot to say something important at the top, which is, as we go, if you have questions, please don't hesitate. We don't need to wait till the end. We will have time for questions at the end, but we certainly don't need, there's no need to hold onto something that's a burning question for you. So please either drop it in the chat or you can do the hand raise thing on Zoom. And I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. All right. So as I said, we're going to go over, today's the first training of a two-part series. So next month, we're going to go more into sort of the logistics, the operations, how it's actually going to work. Today is more about getting you prepped and started with your plan. So we're going to go over, I'm going to check and see where everybody's at, what we need to prep for planning. And maybe if you've already started prepping, maybe there's more you can do, assessments, and then getting started with a timeline. And Janet, I'm going to ask you to drop this link in the chat because obviously you all can't get this off of your screen.
Open the window.
But we've created a template that you can fill out if that is helpful for you. I know everybody learns and processes and plans in different ways, but I'm hopeful that this would be a helpful tool for folks that you can use to think about. And we're going to have a few moments throughout the training where you can actually take some time and fill parts of this in. And hopefully that's helpful for you all. So I wanted to start off, as I said, figuring out kind of where are we all at. So we're gonna just do a quick poll. Janet, if you can pop up the poll real quick to see where folks are in terms of your fundraising plan as of now. I'm just gonna let folks reel in. As that happens, I'm gonna just look at the chat and see who we have here, if I know anybody already. Tarina, I hope I say your name right. I love that anything winter is too cold. That's great. I am originally from South Dakota, and so I love the cold, but now I live in California where it's too warm. All right, great. So it looks like a lot of you have a plan, which is great, and you want to make it better and refine it. And there's only a few of you who are not quite sure what a fundraising plan is. Okay, that's great. I think what that means is for those of you who have a plan, when we go over the template worksheet sections, you can either go ahead and still use the worksheet, or if you want to pull up your own plan while we're going along, that works too. Great. So let me go ahead and share those results. Can folks see that? Let's see, I have an idea, but nothing written down. Love that. I have been there before. Okay, great. Then let's go ahead and move along. Now I'm curious, I would love for folks to just drop in the chat. I imagine everyone's got something that makes it tricky to get a plan done, even if you know what you're doing. So I'm curious what hurdles y'all are feeling right now. And if it's more about not being sure what you want to do, if like literal capacity, you haven't had time, if there are things you don't know from your team. I know I've been in that position before as a fundraiser where there's just information I don't have and I'm trying to get it from other folks. So if folks want to drop in the chat, either one of the letters or any thoughts. Nice. Okay. Got it. Okay. Feels like some form of capacity is an issue for lots of folks. That makes a lot of sense. All right. So we're going to keep those in mind. Hopefully, today's training will help with some of those, at least how to approach and to get over them and clear the path moving forward. So just a thought on being prepared. As I said, going into planning really just with what you've got and not bringing the whole picture can set you up for not the best results. And an important thing, especially for today, is like we don't need every little thing. It's more like we need to know where we're going and we can somewhat figure out how we're getting there as we go. And to really understand your priorities, as we talked about capacities, and the ability, I want folks to really think about making sure you're building into your plan, being able to pivot without losing your way. I'm sure all of you have something going on right now at your organization or personally where, you know, things shift and change, and sometimes it's not great and sometimes it's good. Like maybe you've got a new volunteer who's psyched and it's going to be an amazing thing, and you're going to end up pivoting your plan to be able to incorporate their capacity, or you've got some great new donor who wants to do a big match and you're going to have to shift your plan. Those are like the good pivots. Sometimes, you know, maybe suddenly there's a gap you weren't planning on, but making sure that you build in that ability to pivot. And yeah, if you just stay ready for that, then you don't have to get ready. Okay, so we're just gonna head into sort of our assessment section now. And if folks were able, all right, hold on, one second, sorry. So thinking about what we already know from the last year or two, and for me, especially because this is an election year, whether your organization is doing electoral work or not, obviously it's impacting the space, it's going to impact the calendar. And so making sure you're not only looking at last year, but looking, you know, probably a couple of years back is going to be helpful for understanding trends, also for recognizing if something might have been an outlier, so that you're not assuming that, you know, maybe that great surprising thing that happened, you might not be able to count on that again for sure. So looking at the trends is really important. Thinking about your portfolio of where your money's coming from, and then also your own resources. So like, what is your fundraising budget and what's your capacity? So we're going to start off actually with revenue portfolio, because I feel like this has been relevant for quite a few of the groups that I've been talking with. Looking at this pie chart of where an org's money is coming from, anyone see like a big red flag you'd be worried about right now in our current climate? Yeah. I don't know if any of you are in this position, and it could be one of the reasons you might be worried about your plan for this year, but we want to talk about having a good revenue mix so that we can avoid, if that green goes away, your whole budget is going to really be struggling. So obviously, we've got lots of different sources, the institutional funders, you know, which honestly is where we usually get the bigger dollars. And it is very common for most orgs to have that be the larger part of that pie chart. And I think that's okay. But even in terms of making sure, okay, we do have somebody who's got a similar pie chart to that, where more than half is coming from government grants, which doesn't necessarily have to be a red flag, but it's always good to plan to try to diversify as much as you can, even within the grants. You know, do you just have like a couple main funders? Can you add in a couple smaller ones just to help negate your risk, sorry. And then independent revenue sources. This is one of the things that, as we talk about wanting to make sure our movement is well-funded and able to be independent and pivot and make the choices we need to, these are the sources that really allow you to do that. So whether it's, you know, just individual donors, memberships, your annual fund, doing fee for service, experimenting with new ways to bring money in, having this mix of independent revenue projects, if you can, in addition to the grants, and trying to like make what often is a very small slice of the pie bigger, is something that we want folks to be cognizant of as you go into your plan. I know it can be easy. I've done this before, of like looking at the prior year and just like, we met our goal, let's do that again, instead of thinking about how can we reshape what we want to do. Okay, so again, to think about what worked and didn't over the last couple of years. Some folks may have. Does somebody have a question?
Brothers. Well, actually, I have way more than.
Okay, I couldn't I'm not sure. It's okay. Um, if you do have a question, let me know, or you can drop it in chat. Um, Folks may have joined us. We actually had two benchmark trainings in the fall, partly to get folks ready for both end of year reporting and for this. And if you didn't attend, we can talk through some of the important data. I like to talk about, some people talk about being data driven. I don't love being data driven because there's a lot of ways we should think about what we're going to do and what we prioritize, but we do want to be data informed. And the benchmarks that are important to think through for all of you are donor lifetime value, your fundraising ROI, cost per dollar raised, and then just looking at your trend lines. I know for folks, is your email list going up? Has it been trending down? Is your email list going up, but engagement's going down? Maybe vice versa. Maybe you've got some major donors that you've really been able to cultivate and that's going up. Maybe you've got some good inroads with foundations. Maybe you've got foundations where you're getting worried. I know some foundations have wound down. Maybe you've got government grants that you're worried about and that you're trying to like trend away from. So just kind of giving yourself that like step back view. And we're going to include, I'm not going to drop it in the chat because I don't want folks like doing math problems at the same time we're going over, and we already did a training, but in an email after today, we're going to include a worksheet for how you can calculate these benchmarks if you don't already either have a tool or know how to do that. And we're going to include links to those past trainings that have not only the slides and video, but also resources and tools that you're able to use to figure out these benchmarks so that you can have a better sense of where you're at and measure how things are trending and changing. I'm just going to pause real quick because I know I've been doing a lot of the talking. So do we have any quick questions before I move along? I'll give folks just a little bit of time.
I have
Yes. Sorry, Janet. Yes, go ahead.
Is that for, yeah, I have a question that you can answer or not. I'm not sure how relevant it is. I think in looking at so I'm new to our development team. And I think some of these, we just had a board meeting last night. So I think some of my questions are how much of this should be communicated to other staff members or board members. And I also, just in looking at that previous slide, thinking about earned revenue, this is kind of a side note for myself, is just, I feel like we don't often talk cross-departmentally about where we're at. And there's not a lot of like in-depth looking at that because it is scary to talk about money, I guess, or across departments, if a department if their revenue isn't as high as it needs to be, so there might just be some cultural things going on in the organization around that. But yeah, I'm just curious how much, we should be sharing these kinds of things with other staff members or our board.
Yeah,
What level of detail?
I think first I'll say like communicating across about the planning and expectations and goals for the year, super important. And as you're going through, that's actually the thing we're going to talk about a few times throughout this. In terms of like sharing the more quantitative data, I think that can depend on the departments, what the needs are. I know I've had board members before who like, I don't know, was a marketing executive and knew a lot about benchmarks and all sorts of numbers and wanted to know more and more. And then other board members who were like, are we hitting our goals? Like, so it can depend a little, especially at the board level, for what folks want to know. I do think it's helpful to be able to have these calculated and to be able to at least share that, like, what are some trends that you're seeing? And at least be able to have them to share if folks want. And then I think that's a bigger conversation about like, I don't think you want to necessarily go super in the weeds with your board, but being able to across the team communicate these, I think is important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, great. And yes, just because this was a question in the chat. So afterwards, you're going to get an email. We'll have the deck. As I said, we're recording, and we've got a bunch of tools that we're going to share with you. So yes, and if there's anything that I mentioned along the way that I wasn't already planning, especially if someone has a question, we'll be sure to share. I probably should have said earlier, but we have at Progressive Multiplier a website called The Convergence. You do have to sign up for it, which is really just like enter your email. And we've got tons of old trainings, webinars, tools, worksheets, lots of stuff. So if you haven't already accessed this, you'll be able to in the email we send afterwards. And yeah, so you can check that out. All right, great. Okay, so speaking of, Janet, can you drop the worksheet link in the chat again? Is that all right? If folks can either pull up that worksheet, or if you're old school and you want to do a notepad, I would like to take just a minute and fill out the top section that is about, and you know what, let me see if I can share my screen in a different way. Or I'll just ask, are folks able to access that? Okay. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes, do a little like heads down time, and think about your revenue mix, where money is coming from, any risks or opportunities that you see this year. And then if you have a general sense of the track record, this is not like I need you to go find numbers. This is like, I want you to think about like back of the napkin kind of math. And then what you'll be able to do after this is really like actually dig into the numbers and refine. But something tells me you already have a sense of if things are trending up or down or what you're worried about. So we're just going to take a couple minutes right here and do that. All right. Um, Maybe finish whatever you're in the midst of writing. And like I said, this is a tool you can keep and finish filling out afterwards. But I just wanted to check in. And I drop a note in the chat, but if anyone wants to be brave and talk about it, that would be great. Is there a metric or trend that either you hadn't yet taken into account or you aren't maybe measuring yet that you are going to look into? Mm, Looking into the reserve and how much money. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. Any others? How often new donors transition into reliable annual donors? Uh, Nat, would you be willing to speak a little more to that?
I will do my best. I have my daughter doing virtual school in the background.
No worries.
But we often have certain campaigns or events that attract new people. And I would love to do more work just seeing, once we are communicating with them, does that result in sustained giving, or are they giving just because they were drawn to that event or that campaign, or a friend of theirs told them to give? Does the follow-up communication that we do with them help them to be more loyal and then grow to love our organization, or was it just a one-time gift?
Yeah. Can I ask, do you feel like you have the data and you just need to like look for it and find it, or is that something you need to do a better job of tracking?
I think it's a little bit of both because while I do track all the communications we do, I don't know if I'm tying it directly. Like if somebody's giving to our event, am I tracking, oh, well, they will have received a thank you email, thank you for attending the event. They will have also received a note from our executive director, and then they will be receiving our newsletter. I don't know if I'm tying it directly to how they first joined us or if it's just a laundry list of communications.
Mhm.
I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because you just made me think about something that I've actually been thinking about a lot lately because I'm sure you all know in the digital space, I feel like there is a lot of people are too worried about the initial, like, what did we bring in today? Or like, what did this one email bring in versus knowing data like if a donor first gives at an in-person event, is their lifetime value like double what somebody else is? You know what I mean? And being able to actually know that so that when you're planning an event, and events always have lots of like staff capacity and cost and overhead, but is that long-term ROI like much higher? And that would be a great thing to look into. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Um, I just look at return and retention rate of donors, and then change for election years. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I don't know if there's if your organization does electoral work and that's why you're bringing it up, or just what I mentioned about like election years are always different.
Yeah, and to be honest, we're a fairly young organization, so I don't even know if we would have enough data for the past election years on that. But yeah, we don't do election work specifically, but I just imagine that that might divert some individual giving if people are donating to campaigns during election years. So that's like one of the risks that we're thinking about going into this year that might affect our fundraising.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. All right, great. Um, all right, so we've looked at trends, what's been coming in. Now I want folks to think about your capacities and what you are working with, your staff time, volunteer support, and what your budget is. So for staff, thinking about the costs with current staff, including opportunity costs for deployment and trying anything out that's new, and remembering, you know, anytime you're trying something new, there's going to be a learning curve. That's okay. It's going to take staff more time. Um, what the skills are among your staff and volunteers. And then if you have any gaps, is there something you need to build into your plan this year? Maybe you need to add a staff person. Maybe you need to think about adding some trainings or professional development. Just like making sure we're including that whole picture. And then volunteers and interns can be super helpful. I feel like a lot of orgs sometimes it can be effort to make sure that volunteers and interns are well managed and you're really able to use their support. But I find it to be an excellent way to boost your capacity. And volunteers themselves also often are donors. They're like sort of little ambassadors for your organization. So thinking about what skills there are, volunteers, board. I know I made that comment earlier about having a board member who was like a marketing pro. Were there things, could he sit down with someone on our staff and have lunch and talk shop? And would that be helpful? What are ways you can be creative about how to use the folks who are in and around your organization? And then thinking about the availability throughout the calendar year, maybe your organization is one that has summer interns. So obviously you might not have as much capacity the whole year. What can you plan out specifically for the summer? Are there various events where you get a bunch of volunteers and then they're really engaged right after that? And so you want to keep up the momentum. So thinking about that, not just in terms of the capacity, but when you'll have that capacity the most. And then just thinking about like tying it all together. I know sometimes I heard someone mention like, maybe not talking to the other folks in the org, or like they don't like to talk about money, but we can't do what we want to do without that money. And so making sure you're thinking of yourself not as if you're a team of one, that you're this little island, but that you really do have all these folks around you who can help and who do have capacity, and to really try to think about how we can engage them. And then thinking through the budget, as I was talking about this earlier, events definitely have costs if that is something that you do, and making sure you're thinking of sort of all the costs. Is there something you'd really want to change this year, or ways you can cut costs? Your marketing and promotion budget, technology and software. I know at different organizations, this can be handled differently in terms of like whose budget it falls into. But maybe there's something you want to try that's different this year. So make sure you're incorporating that cost as you're thinking about it for your planning. And then materials that you might need. Maybe you want to test out selling t-shirts or having other types of merchandise, and figuring out what your costs are to get that started. And then, of course, if you are traveling, whether that's for donor meetings, for conferences, any of that, making sure to incorporate all of those costs into your budget as you're planning. And they also seem to keep creeping up for travel and conferences, I have been noticing. So making sure to incorporate that in your plan. If you're doing direct mail or even just your thank you letters, etc., postage and shipping, and then miscellaneous expenses. Anything I'm missing that folks can think of in terms of costs? Maybe a cost that's on your mind because it's going up. Software. Oh yeah, Janet, I'm gonna ask you to chime in. We did a webinar about software tools, yes?
I think specifically like CRM.
Okay.
But no, actually, I lied. It was CRM marketing. Like I remember we talked like MailChimp and how some of those pieces of tech can sync together. So yes.
So Jenny, happy to either, as I mentioned, we'd offer the one-on-one coaching. So I'm happy to do like that type of meeting with you afterwards, or email, and might be able to help you find some tools that we have on the Convergence already of either recorded training, or we might have some write-ups about that. Definitely. Yeah, special events for sure. Okay, great. All right, so now that we've gone over that, if you can go back to your worksheet, and now we're going to go down to the measuring your capacity section. And I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes to think about staff time, costs, availability, and if there are any gaps that you can think of from your current capacities and where you'd like to be, what you'd ideally like. What are you going to urge your staff to maybe bring on this year? All right. Hopefully you're able to get at least some of that filled out, and that'll be helpful moving forward. So I'm curious, just thinking about the capacity, and to go back to the question earlier about talking across your organization. Is there somebody on your team, and that can be your staff, your board, your volunteers, that you want to connect with as part of your planning that you weren't already planning to? And would you be willing to share?
I can go.
Great.
We have a very underutilized board. Unfortunately, most of them are on our board because they are friendly with our executive director. And so our executive director often feels that we can't ask them for things because they're friends of hers. And so that they don't have any set guidelines on what are their expectations and responsibility for being board members. Um, and the executive director and I often talk in circles about wanting them to do more, to bring more connections, to give us more openings into funders or to people in their networks who could help us, but yet not wanting to ask them for too many things, not wanting to send too many emails, not wanting to do any more meetings than we already have. So this circular pattern that I would love to get out of, and to be able to talk to the board members and just ask, what are you willing to do and how can I help you so that we can get there?
Yeah. Now you mentioned not having guidelines. I'm guessing this is on your mind already, but have you thought about trying to draft some so that you can find that nice ground of getting the ED on board to say, yeah, I'll agree to that level, but I don't want you to go, too far beyond.
I've been kind of planting the seed because I will often bring up, like, I think we should really have some sort of guidelines or expectations, some sort of contract in place that we all can agree on. And it just doesn't seem to be something that she's willing to do. So it's about, I don't want to put work into something that's ultimately not going to go anywhere. So I'd be
Yeah.
curious if anyone has any suggestions on other strategies to kind of engage a disengaged board other than a contract.
Mhm. I'm gonna open that up to the room, and also Janet, if you have any thoughts. Um,
I can share. So something that we did, it's something that we're working with too, is just like increasing our board engagement. And so in the bylaws, our board members there is a give and get policy. And we reviewed the give and get policy, and the way that it's written, it's pretty open. Like there's no set amount that a board member is required to donate or fundraise. Um, and so we considered like and this is something that we did in our fundraising committee, like within the board, our sustainability committee. And they reviewed the policy. They liked the way that it's written, but then they together came together and set a collective goal for the board. And
mhm,
so this year, everyone's working toward that goal. Some folks, and and we also made it clear to everyone that it's a give and get. I think all of that takes some time too, right? There's like having the policy, meeting with the board members, providing them with data. They wanted to see like kind of what was the fundraising that the board did collectively the last 3 years. I had to provide that information to them. Um, I don't know if that's helpful.
that that's super helpful. I'll
Yeah.
let Nat answer if it was helpful for you too.
Yeah, no, it was really helpful for me. I like the idea of having the board involved in setting up what the guidelines are, and that might help my executive director feel a bit more comfortable with the idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's always good to just like put it back on them and have them decide versus like the staff coming to them to kind of send or give them kind of like expectations, right?
Hmm. I love that collective goal too, so that it's not. I know some people don't want to serve on a board because the expectation of literally what one person needs to bring in can be really high sometimes. And I like that, that collective encourages things like literally just making introductions, like you were saying, Nat. You don't necessarily have to do the ask yourself, but like thinking about bringing people in. That's really great. I'm just looking over at the chat. Um, there's a good comment about thinking about an advisory board to people who have other skills. Thank you, Anna. That sounds great. Awesome. Okay. So now I want to think a little bit about timeline because, and I will admit, I learned this the hard way. My first year that I was in charge of the online fundraising budget, I thought I just had to make sure I hit my goal by the end of the year and that it didn't matter how much had come in the first quarter, for instance. But sometimes it really matters when your money is coming in the door and making sure everyone is aware of mm, both what might need to happen, what you're hoping will happen, what you expect to happen in terms of mapping out both like maybe program their biggest thing that's going to cost a lot of money happens in March. And maybe you fundraised for that last year. And so it doesn't matter so much, but maybe you really need to bring some money in early in the year. Or maybe you're an organization that knows that every year you raise 80% of your budget in November and December. And that's fine, but you've got to know that and be able to point to it so that you don't have somebody totally freaking out in July being like, we're only at this percent and going, this is very normal. It's going to be okay. We planned around this. It's fine. Um, so thinking about that calendar of if there's any reason that you need to bring in a certain amount by a certain time, or if there are key events, moments that are big fundraising moments, so that you have those mapped into your calendar. And especially if you are thinking about adding in any capacity, to really work backwards so that you're going to have folks onboarded and trained, whether they're staff or volunteers, in time to really help for those moments. So I thought we could like brainstorm a little of any key dates. I know folks have talked a little bit about special events. You might have an annual event that happens. Maybe you even have like a really big anniversary fundraising gala this year, or something that's definitely going to take a lot of capacity, but also will bring in more. I don't know if folks, is anybody, I guess I'll take a breath and say, is there any like key dates that are on folks' mind for this year? Key moments?
We're a trafficking organization and we always do a 4th of July fundraiser tying the like themes of independence to the work that we do. So that's always a big date for us. And we're also unorthodox in that our gala is at the end of the year and not earlier. So a lot of the money comes in at the end of the year. So that 4th of July fundraiser helps to have some money coming in early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important to know. In the chat, I see Earth Day. Yeah. Yep. More Earth Day. End of year. Giving Tuesday. Yep. Annual conference. Those are always big productions. I remember needing like a week to sleep after running a conference at my previous organization. Earth Month. Yep. Okay, great. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked through where we've been, I want everybody to just think a little bit about where you want to go this year. So folks can either, if you've already got your like, I have this thing and I want to talk it out, or a new idea you just came up with, if you want to think a little bit. I'm curious what folks are visioning for this year. Anything that's coming to mind? Yeah, Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think something that we've noticed this year, we're a small nonprofit based in Mexico City, but just institutional donors are thinking differently. Like there's different times. Like normally our donor would renew us in November, and now they're like, oh, we're realigning our vision. So either donors are pulling out, they're realigning their vision. And so obviously like the key phrase is diversify, right? Something that we're thinking is how can we involve local businesses, maybe to provide like local businesses to provide monthly donations along that line as opposed to individual donors. Historically, we have not had the best individual donors. I think sometimes it's difficult to communicate. We're like a second tier organization that provides funding and capacity strengthening to other organizations and activists. And so sometimes that's just difficult to communicate. So we've been playing around with the idea of looking for monthly sponsors from local businesses.
I like that idea. We'll also say, you said Mexico City, right, Jenny?
Yeah.
I got to visit in November and it was lovely. So I'm a little jealous that you get to be there all the time. Okay, I saw as Jenny was sharing, I saw some folks shared in chat additional people looking to like diversify how money is coming in. Foundations are shifting. Donor stewardship. Yep. Spending more time on relationships. Great. Not having a gala. A concert instead for election work. That's great. Diane, do you want to share a little bit about that? Sometimes choosing what not to do is an even bigger.
Yeah, the gala we didn't have a gala this last year either. 2024 was but 2024 was the last time we had a gala. And it's something that we do annually, and we always say it's something we need to change because we do election work. So the gala is like all hands on deck in October. And then at the same time, we're doing the civic engagement work. So it's just like a lot for staff. And so we decided to take this year off because we are also engaged in our strat plan. And so, and we're taking 2026 off because we made the decision we're not going to have the gala on election years. And instead, we're going to have a more public facing event. We call it Vivir y Luchar. And we kind of tested this out 2019 during the first Trump administration. And I think at that time we were all just like really exhausted and realizing we need to bring in like joy into like the movement. And so we closed down our parking lot and we had like resource information and political education shops for participants, and then we also had a stage where like local bands performed. There was like wellness activities too, so we want to bring that to scale to kick off our election work in 2026. And it did feel a little bit risky. I think the board was like really nervous about it too. Um, but I think it's also a good way to integrate like the our programmatic work with our fundraising work. Um, and then also again just bringing in more visibility to our work, more just awareness about the work that we're doing about inner city struggle. And then w it'll be free to folks to attend, but we will still have like the sponsorships. And when I looked at the gala benchmarks, most of the fundraising came from institutional donors anyway. And there was in when was it? During one of the COVID years, we had like an online gala, and we actually raised more than the previous year. And some of that might have been because, it was a COVID year. But I think the what we learned too is that like institutions are going to give to us no matter what. There's that trust there. And so as long as we make the ask for a sponsorship, there's still the potential to have that revenue. And we're spending a lot of money on the gala too, and not getting a whole lot out of it. So
Yeah, I love that, Diane, that did you do the benchmark training? The way you mentioned that the way you looked at the benchmarks makes me wonder if you did.
I did the benchmark training, but I looked at the benchmarks before doing the training.
Gotcha.
So yeah, this is kind of leading up. This is the fundraising plan that I worked on for 24, 25. And part of that was like going ahead to this current fiscal year.
That's great. I love how you're naming the understanding the full ROI, because sometimes I find, especially people don't always consider, especially outside of development, the like full amount of staff time and how much, like if you're having someone put like half of their time into a giant event, and it's when you think about how much you're putting in and how much you're getting out, if it's not that much, maybe you cut it. And that can be scary. Like you said, it's a risk.
Yeah.
But you
And I
might,
don't know if we're necessarily cutting it, but we're kind of like using it instead to
yeah,
support the
yeah.
programmatic work, right?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. That's a really good example. Um, thank you. Anybody else want to share before we move along? Okay, great. Perfect. Okay. So I thought this time, since we talked a little bit about dates already, if you want to just take like, I don't know, a minute or so with the worksheet, If you didn't already write down key dates, there's a timeline box and you can just add a couple of things there and then we can come back to that. So just give folks about a minute. Okay, great. So this is something that is at the bottom of your worksheet, but I just want to talk it over for now. Now that we've gone through a bunch of the sort of bigger picture, what you're going to need to plan and assess and start visioning for the future, I wanted to bring us to more like maybe, I know a lot of you named we were trying to diversify our revenue this year. Maybe there's a particular campaign that you would want to map out. So we have just like a general template that you can work off of, where first you're going to name your objective, what you're aiming to do, your prospect list, like who are you thinking about? You could also think of your audience if it's less specific in that way. Materials and assets you're going to need. Are there specific activities, additional needs you're going to have, and then like what your stewardship plan is. So I'm going to go over in particular a case study about a campaign. We actually worked with PFLAG, and I named, this is another thing that we can share in the follow-up email if you would like to look at the like full case study. We have a link on our Convergence site. They really wanted to grow their monthly sustainers program. So I know a couple of you have mentioned something related to that, getting first-time donors to give again, or being able to get donors maybe who do give every year to actually give monthly. And so that was their goal. For their list, they obviously went to their current donors, but then also folks who weren't donors, but on their email list, as well as social media. And then they did do some paid ads in addition. So for materials, they had a direct mail program they used. They had an email strategy, digital ads, and then they also tested incentives. I think I mentioned earlier, like, do you want to do merchandise? Are people, is the cost of a t-shirt worth having somebody jump up to giving monthly instead of just once a year? Their key activities were Pride Month, very busy, and then Giving Tuesday. And then for campaign needs, they thought through the strategies and plans they would need for each tactic. And I know this is like maybe a slightly more complicated one. Their staffing and then data systems for tracking. And then for their stewardship plan, as we talked about, it was this multi-channeled outreach. So I just wanted to go over a few lessons learned because I think it feeds back into the things that you'll want to prepare and think about as you're creating your campaign. They really talked afterwards about the need to invest in capacity. To do this type of revenue gen requires some really focused staff time, and trying to just like add it on to somebody's plate without really thinking through the capacity needs doesn't go as well. They kind of stumbled at the beginning of the project because they feel like they didn't fully carve out the time that was required to get it going. And then to be realistic about goals and account, as I said, for like capacity limitations, being able to shift if needed. One of the things that I think is exciting about their project, even though maybe in the first year, they weren't able to bring in quite what they had hoped to do. Hold on, I'm just pulling up. Their projected ROI, given the lifetime value of someone who's going to give monthly, they were able to project out bringing in about $30,000 total. So it's both thinking about like what you'll bring in this year, but then what's going to set you up longer term to have that better revenue mix. And then direct mail. I remember I know I told you all that my bread and butter is digital, but direct mail for a lot of folks still works great, and to not disregard that. And it also, when you're thinking about that multi-channel, maybe someone doesn't give from the letter they get in the mail, but then they're reminded of it and they give the next time they get an email, or vice versa. And they were really able to have a strong conversion rate with direct mail. They also really tried to tie the donations to their direct advocacy work that they were doing, and found that that worked really well. And then I know someone was asking about needing new software, but being able to make sure you have the ability to have the clean data processes and be able to track and report, so that you can really truly assess what your ROI is, what the value is, what people are bringing in, and those trends. Okay, so we've started a plan. As I said, this is part one of a two-part training. So things you're going to want to do is continue to collect and analyze data. You'll want to measure those capacities, thinking about if you're going to need more staff or volunteer time or board. I love that conversation we had about board involvement. Thinking more about your goals now that you've thought more about revenue mix. There's a page on our worksheet we sort of hopped over that I think you can work on afterwards, called Bringing It All Together, of now that you've thought about your revenue mix from previous, what you want it to be, what your capacities are, kind of bringing all of that together as you think about moving forward into really nailing down a plan. And then being able to modify it, talking cross collaboratively at your organization with different folks, understanding program. Diane, I love that example of turning what was mostly a fundraising gala into an event that is both program and brings money in. I love to hear stories like that. So as I said, the next training is going to, which I might let Sabrina, do you want to pop in and say hi? My colleague Sabrina is going to be doing next month's training. Do you want to say hi?
Hi everyone. Yeah, sorry I'm a bit late, but yeah, so if you join us for next month's training, we're really going to focus on taking what you guys went over today and built today and making sure that they're aligned, you're prioritizing your goals and strategies and really looking into those strategies, plotting them, and actually like operationalize and like building and finalizing your plan. We'll go over what a full fundraising calendar is and what your plan should look like, and we'll be able to dive a little bit deeper into any of the other questions that come up as you guys kind of source the pieces that Kathy outlined that you should be looking at during today's training. So we can definitely go over all of that. But I'm excited to kind of get our hands, roll up our sleeves for the next training on February 20th, I think is the date, if I am correct.
Thank you, Sabrina. And I did want to take a moment because I know some of you were more in the refining your plan space. And I know I've also been in a moment of Sabrina's giving a training on the 20th. Maybe you need to have your plan final before then. So feel free to reach out for the one-on-one coaching and also all the resources that we're going to share if you want to be able to like jump ahead. Totally understandable. It makes a lot of sense. And we can definitely help with that. So I want to just go over some like general tips as you're thinking about this. Think about using free and low cost tools, social media, again, the volunteer networks, community partnerships. I know folks mentioned like the sponsors that can bring in money. I think it was Jenny mentioned businesses that you're going to look into as giving monthly. And then communicating regularly, which I know was one of the first questions we had about really keeping everyone in the loop. And I know it can be hard because some folks don't like to have to talk about money, but as we said, it's what allows us to do this work. And I know for me that really thinking and anchoring, especially like having that revenue mix and the independent revenue generation as a program person, knowing like, if we can up this line, you're more able to choose what you want to do outside of the bounds of grants, right? You have the ability to pivot quickly when something happens, and to be able to work fully on your needs. And so that's one of the ways that you can maybe bring program staff and others into the fold if they're a little hesitant to talk fundraising. And of course, to keep your donors engaged. And I see, and then of course, to thank donors promptly. Obviously, doing acknowledgement, but I actually just recently saw a friend of mine on LinkedIn talked about an org that she happened to give to once. And then she was so impressed by their thank you and follow up that she's like, I only just learned about this organization, but I'm suddenly a monthly sustainer. And I've just been so impressed with their communication and what they're doing and the work that they're doing on the ground. So wanted to leave that tip. And then I see a comment in the chat. Experience with newsletters or annual reports serving fundraising within development departments or other departments. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this from my experience, and then I don't know, Sabrina, if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had, I will say, I have had good success. I learned I needed to plan earlier to make sure I was cross collaborating for like I'm thinking an end of year type of newsletter, because I found it did work best to work across departments, and I think who owns that at your org could be different depending on your structure and how things are set up. And I will admit that is a thing that made one very challenging one time because nobody was owning it, and so we had to do it very last minute. But being able to nail that down and have a structure and cadence to it, whether it's you have your normal stuff and then at end of year, you've got like a big readout, or maybe you do a monthly newsletter, maybe you have weekly newsletters. That would be quite a bit. I know I for a while was doing like quarterly, we call them report backs instead of a newsletter that was really focused on the work we were doing at Ultraviolet. But yeah, I don't know, Sabrina, if there's anything you want to add into that.
Yeah, so I worked with a few years ago, I was on the development team at our local Planned Parenthood affiliate, and the newsletter and annual reports were actually key parts of our strategy to engage mid and major level donors. There was never like a hard ask within the newsletter. I think that was one of the things we made sure that wasn't there. We were sharing the responsibility with our communications team, both the writing and the development. So communications did have their own lists, development had their own lists, and we handled how to distribute those. And we worked to make sure that, nobody was on both lists and everyone knew what was happening. Excuse me. So what we did to use them to drive our mid and major level giving was we would use them as follow-up tools. So if we knew we had a prospect that was a little bit colder to us, it was, gave once or twice, and we knew that they had capacity, we were interested to see if we can increase their engagement, we would use it as a personal outreach tool. So if it was a digital newsletter or a digital annual report that year, we would personally follow up and send a link. We would intentionally drop it maybe like a couple days before it went live to our full list as like a sneak peek. Like, wanted to send this to you. It's coming in your inbox. But I wanted to get you the digital link just in case you're interested to have a conversation. So we really used it as like feelers and qualification almost to see if anyone was particularly interested in any of the articles that we had. We would also build the newsletters, mostly the newsletters, if we wanted interest in like see if there was donors that we needed to move that were particularly interested in like education, then we would feature two education programs or anything on our student access programs that we were doing as well. We would feature those, and then we would target outreach and communication with those donors that were particularly interested in those to help kind of warm them up. There was a soft ask vehicle in them. So there was like a remit form in all newsletters and annual reports. And of course, a light letter specifically to certain donors and campaigns. But we definitely use them and saw a lot of success in warming and using them as like qualification and cultivation tools rather than solicitation tools. So that's been where I've seen the success in using newsletters, annual reports, these kinds of things with donors, is using them more as qualification and cultivation rather than hard solicitation. So that is what I would keep in mind when you're doing those and making sure that they're evergreen. So like the newsletters were quarterly, so we would use them for the quarter to, as a cultivation tool or as a move that we can engage certain donors or groups of donors with, and that's how we integrated them within our fundraising plan. So if we knew that we were going to drop a newsletter in the fall, in our fundraising plan, we would plan to, uh, solicit donors or do a campaign of donors around education because we knew planning with our communications department that we were going to write education. We're going to put those articles in. So it was a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sabrina. That's great. All right. So I'm curious, I know we talked earlier about what hurdles people were facing, and I think a lot of you named time, capacity, and dependency. So like maybe not hearing from other staff. Curious if things are feeling a little better now, or if hopefully the hurdles don't feel any bigger. If anyone wants to share. All right. Okay, we'll keep going. And then I'm curious if there are two things you might be taking away from today's training. So Janet, we have a little poll again. If folks are willing to share, go ahead and pull that up. And that one you can just go ahead and fill in. Great. Cool. As folks are doing that, I'm also going to have Janet go ahead and drop a link in the chat. Resilience Initiative likes to do a survey after these trainings, so we can see how we're doing, hear your feedback, adjust these, make sure that we're able to provide the trainings that you all need and what's helpful. I think that will also be in the follow-up email, but we'll put it in the chat. And then as folks are filling out your takeaways, I'm happy to stick around. We've got about 12 more minutes for any questions that folks might have, or feel free to, and I can answer, Sabrina can answer, Janet, or anyone else on the call. It's been great to hear from all of you. Yeah, okay, great.
I do have a question, Kathy.
Yeah.
When we were talking earlier about the board, and our board is exceptional in many, many ways, but they really struggle with the idea of get. When we ask them to do a board match, it is really just their identity and their giving versus thinking through how they connect. They are our community connectors.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of revisiting with them on what get means doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere. So, where are there some tools around sort of the bigger vision of get and engagement and what that can mean? Because
Sabrina, can I ask you
just
to help
talking about it isn't getting us there.
Yeah. I am happy to talk about this. This was my bread and butter at Planned Parenthood. We had a whole committee of what we called volunteer solicitors. And they were made up of our major donors, but mostly our board, because our board was really involved and we wanted to capitalize on that. And we also had, the back and forth about a give get. Most of our board, thankfully, 99% were giving. But then we also wanted to highlight what the get was. They didn't understand that. Was that just getting our friends to also buy like a sponsorship at whatever event, or to, give in honor, yes. What we found what was helpful was working with across programs, and we figured out like what other resources do we need here. And then we would outline it. Like, are there things in kind that we actually needed? We were Planned Parenthood. Most of the time it was no, we couldn't get it. But we would outline was we need you to get us relationships. Introduce us to, someone at this foundation, or someone here. And we would then follow that relationship. Like if our ask was get us to uh, invites or get us to meetings with colleagues of yours who might be interested in supporting the organization or hearing about this organization. We would, follow up. They would be our support staff and support solicitors. They'd partner with us on building that relationship. And if that gift came to fruition, then we would add it to their get. They got us a relationship or a donation that was worth, X amount of money. Um, what what is it particularly that like have you worked with them on and how it's being presented to them right now as they understand it?
I think that they don't, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I get the sense that they just don't
Like that they don't want to ask.
understand. They don't want to ask.
Okay. Yeah.
And um, the more I talk about it as not an ask, it's an invitation to join us, it's an invitation to be part of this community. It's to come to the events and see the magic of what we do,
Absolutely.
because what we do is in person is an incredibly powerful experience versus when you just, I mean, sometimes when you talk about it, people want to join, but mostly you want to
Yeah.
come and be part of something. And we have an organization where you can come and feel the joy in our work. Um, it's different than some of the other organizations on this call where it's messier and harder and people can't participate in the experience, but the the need is greater for society in some ways. But for what we do, which is community forestry, which is bringing together, and this lever of community change and
Yeah.
engagement, you come, you go, oh, I get this.
Yeah. And I think it's very, very common, right? The like they don't want I think when we think of fundraising and like a give get, people are like, "Ooh, I we have this weird relationship with money, right?" Even as fundraisers, we grew up with there's just a weird relationship with money. We live in a capitalist society. I can go on a whole other training. I'm pretty sure we have other trainings on this, that we talk about this. But one of the things I have found that have has helped is reframing what you're asking for, and reframing to the board, to your volunteers, to whoever, what it means to ask someone to participate, right? We reframe a lot of the work that I do is letting these volunteers and these more board members know that you're already fundraising because fundraising is organizing, right? When you talk about the work, even at that base level, like, if they've talked about the work the way that you just did, they're fundraising for the organization. They're creating interest, they're building a relationship, or they're trying to build that bridge of a relationship. They're already doing it. And that's all you need them to do is to continue to do that. And it's just tacking on that extra very line. Like, can I introduce you to someone at the organization that could, talk to you a little bit more about how you can get involved? And that's it. Like giving them those different pathways and different framing of what we're doing here. You don't necessarily need them to begin the big bucks, right? What you need them to do is resource, like to build resources for you. And that includes relationships. That might include hard resources that you all need. That can be funding, yes, absolutely. But their job as a board is to help you resource. And that is all that they're doing. So when they talk about why they're on the board to people, they're fundraising. They're doing the hard part, they're doing the big part of fundraising. And I think reframing it in that way and helping pivot that will help them be a little bit more comfortable approaching that get and approaching, how to figure out how to figure out, how to reach that get goal that you all have assigned to them, is reframing that. aspect of fundraising because it is scary, especially right now. So I think that might help a little bit um, of pivoting it that way. And I'm happy to talk about that more. I have run several trainings already this year. It's not a like a it is a very common problem. I had one a couple weeks ago where we were talking about this, and I have one in like 2 weeks where I'm going to be talking to a board about this. So it is we have absolutely have resources on the convergence. I don't know if we shared that link with you yet about board trainings and stuff. So we can absolutely send those too.
Mhm. Yeah, we're gonna, as I mentioned, we'll send an email that will include the convergence link.
Right.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing, Anna. Um, any other questions from folks or things you're thinking about? Do you need to brainstorm? I'll give folks a minute. It's funny. One of my someone who helped train me in fundraising, one of the things she used to teach was to just let people sit in silence while you made the ask, and that it was okay and it could get awkward and just sit there. Because it can feel awkward to make the ask, but that's okay. We gotta live with it. Alexandra, you have something.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling that the answer is going to be a suggestion to participate in the one-to-one coaching request. But one of the things that you went over today was really around like staffing and staff capacity and time and um, I don't really know how to frame this, but like, do you have any suggestions around that, like when you don't actually have like dedicated development or fundraising personnel on the team? Because I know like it kind of came up in that lessons learned in the case study, um, where it was sort of like a side project. And so I was just kind of like wondering if you were able to share any recommendations that like came out of that, um, especially considering that like you may not have the budget to actually like have a dedicated staff member.
Yeah. Can I ask, are you like a development team of one, or are you doing multiple things right now?
So I'm actually the operations manager. So in general, like my position, it focuses on like board support, governance, human resources, um, the actual like operations compliance of the organization. But recently fundraising and development operations has gotten folded into that as well.
Okay.
And then we do have one of our co-executive directors who's also had that folded into their role recently,
Okay.
as well.
I will say I think there's two things, and Serena, I'm happy to let you chime in too. One of the parts of considering the staff time is partly to just be real about like not trying to do some giant new venture if you don't have capacity for it. Or naming, if we're going to do this, we need to figure out, maybe, I know someone earlier mentioned like needing to take out of the reserve last year. Like maybe you say, I think we could have a really sustainable program if we could just have this much to put into it. And maybe you hire a contractor to help kick something off, or I don't know what that might look like. Or it could just be about like being real in your goals and what you're planning for this year to recognize the capacity crunch. So those are my thoughts, but Sabrina, I don't know if you have anything else you'd want to add.
Yeah, it was essentially going to be that is measuring your capacity to what you can do. If you want to run like a major individual giving program, it has to come out of somewhere, right? Janet actually put a great point in there because she's our resourcing queen here at PM. But tracking that time, right? It's about doing that pre-work and like a little bit of the prep, building your own metrics. So if you want to do like an individual email, like an email campaign, let's say you want to start launching a regular email campaign, start taking measure of how long it takes you to do something. What is, the time from inception to execution? How long did it take you to write those templates and get them, approved and the list built and everything done? How long did it take you? Can you feasibly do that month to month, or is it 4 times a year only, like in a quarterly push? Um, Capacity is probably the biggest block in planning for the year. We only have so much that we can do, especially when we're wearing multiple hats in an organization, right? You still have to run the other work that you're doing. So definitely make sure that you know what your staff capacity is. If you only have 30% of your time to dedicate to development, figure out what fits in that 30%. Is it one email a quarter, like designing that program and having it launch one email a quarter? Or is it that you know that the event is going to be a bigger ROI in that space? Because there's more help, there's intersections of the work that you're doing, there's maybe a bigger return depending on your organization, but it is measuring your capacity and also, again, yes, being real. Um, you're not gonna, I'm hoping your board isn't going to ask you to, have a $5 million individual giving goal, and there's only like 10 of you on staff. We have to be realistic about what we can do in the amount of time that we have. And then with, measuring your time and your capacities and planning, then you can take it to the board, your executive director, whoever, and say, this is what we can do with my 30%. Imagine what we can do if we had someone who could do this at 50% of their time. We know that we can increase our giving here, or here's a case for us to hire and to make the investment into a consultant who this could be 100% of their time. This is what we will project that, the results that we will get based on what I'm seeing in the work that I can do in my limited capacity. I think it's there. There's not a like immediate solution. It is planning and being a little bit intentional about how you're looking at your work for the next year, for the next couple months. Maybe planning that out and paying a little bit more attention about like how much time you're putting together, how complicated something is. I worked with an organization where getting an email approved, like an email campaign approved, had to go through 10 people. So like why? That elongated our timeline and upped our, the capacity that we needed to maintain an email program. So take a look at that in like these next couple months so that you can build a case for increased support or on the flip side, a more conservative development fundraising goal because you cannot do that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That was really
And
helpful.
we're
Thank
also
you.
still happy to do one-on-one coaching, as I said. Yeah. And I know we're at time. So if anybody else has questions, feel free to reach out and follow up. We'll be, I think Resilience Initiative is going to be sending y'all an email that has the links we mentioned, and really appreciate everybody sharing. I feel like we get to learn from each other, which is great. Such a good community. So thank you.